Cement is typically the glue which is used to make concrete, and concrete is an element of buildings, and that's very important to make sure that when we produce cement and then when we produce concrete, we can, on the one hand, reduce the impact on the environment, but also produce a product which in the end makes a benefit. And it makes a benefit because the buildings in concrete are somehow resilient, they are affordable to some people, and when we consider that in 2050 we're going to be in 9+ billion people, and 70% of these people will live in cities where you will have buildings. It's very important to provide housing for these people, but also affordable and resilient housing, and concrete is one element of that. Typically producing cement, you take limestone, and then there is a chemical reaction. You grind it a little bit, and then you put it in a kiln at a very high temperature, something like 1,500 degrees, and then the chemical reaction happens. So it means that with this high temperature, you produce some CO2, but you have the chemical reactions which then makes the clinker to be grinded and to produce the cement. So the way to do it is to make sure that on the one hand we use less resources if possible, so less limestone. So if we can have alternative raw materials, that's good. And if we can reduce also the fuel, whatever fuel we put in the kilns, because we need a lot of fuel for putting the temperature so high, then we reduce globally the energy intensity of the process. And the process is such that with this temperature we can use any type of fuel. So the traditional ones are fossil ones, so they are coal, they are petcoke, and any other types of fuels. But you could potentially replace those fuels by any organic fuel. So it could be municipal solid waste, it could be sewage sludge, it could be biomass. Anything almost can be put on the kiln. What is very important is that we know exactly what is the input in the kilns, because if we put organic material, it's an alternative fuel, but it's also an alternative raw material. So nothing goes out, everything is trapped in the clinker. So that's why we are very vigilant, and we look very much at what we put inside the kiln. And for energy efficiency, we have obviously to try and see if we can use alternative fuels, but we have optimized the whole process. We can also reduce the quantity of clinker we put in the cement, and we are also working on the way of capturing the CO2 and trying to reuse it into new products, or to store it if it goes in the future as a solution, which is not yet the case at the moment. What we are doing at CSI, we are not promoting one product compared to another. What we want to make sure is that the builders, the developers, etc., know exactly what is the performance of their products. And for that, having building codes, having labels that enable the people to know exactly what is the performance of a building is very important. So the concrete can have properties, have thermal properties, which insulate from the heat in the summer, from the cold in the winter, which some other materials don't have. But you can have also buildings with combinations of materials. It's not necessarily one material competing to another. You have concrete in bridges, you have concrete in dams, you have concrete in pavements. You can have concrete almost everywhere. What is important is that on the overall usage and building of the concrete, that we consider all the elements into the overall balance towards the environment. We don't only consider the energy, but we also consider the water that is used for it, etc. And basically what we input into a building, if we put concrete, then it probably lasts longer. And if we consider on a life cycle basis, which is in the end what we need to consider, concrete is a key element of it. Climate change today is no longer a matter of modelization or mathematical computations, it's happening. We have seen some recent events for which it's a clear materialization of climate change, and the recent report by the IPCC confirms that the climate change is there and that humankind is one of the responsibilities of climate change. So what we need to do is to try to anticipate what may happen in the future, and anticipating means that if we can have some buildings which are more resilient, some roads and bridges and infrastructure which is more resilient, then we can bring solutions for the modern society in terms of cities, because a lot of people will be living in the cities, and also in terms of mobility. Then we have to rethink probably the way cities have been designed, and we have discussed that in our forum over the past 2 days, and then trying to have probably a little bit more condensed cities with a little bit more floors in the buildings, not skyscrapers, but instead of having all individual houses and a lot of land used, for that, probably having 1 or 2 stories or 3 stories buildings. That makes sense.